We have the team here, and I know that it takes the Department of Navy and Marine Corps team to make that occur. So with that, some opening comments from the Marine Corps and the Navy, just because we know that in order for us to engage, it's going to take the whole team working holistically to get there together.
Morning, sir. Friends, happy to be here. Welcome to the USMC 2025 Spectrum Summit. My name is Chief Warrant Officer Richard Reese. I am the Senior Spectrum Planning Officer for Headquarters of Marine Corps DCI. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you here. The second half of last year, when we did our summit on the East Coast, we did have General Glavy as you were stepping into your seat. So it's great to see senior leadership involved with Spectrum, especially with what's going on today in today's climate. So look forward to hearing what you bring to us today in your keynote, sir. And folks, look forward to a few days of great briefs and so on and so forth. So welcome to the 2025 Spectrum Summit. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Johnson, OpNav N2N6N. I'm the CNO lead for electromagnetic environmental effects and spectrum matters. It's my honor to welcome my boss, Vice Admiral Karl Thomas, who is the Deputy CNO for Information Warfare at OpNav N2N6 and the Director of Naval Intelligence. The fact that we are privileged to have Vice Admiral Thomas with us today, I think, underscores the importance at Navy leadership levels that are being placed upon Spectrum, and certainly with Vice Admiral Thomas's deputy, Ms. Jennifer Edgen, we are really at the OpNav level having a lot of more focused discussions about how to engage, how to describe what our requirements are for Spectrum, and how do we convey that message. So I won't bother to elaborate any further, but certainly much of what we saw in the video today, we're going to be talking about all week. And a lot of it's going to be focused on messaging. How do we get that message succinct, persuasive? That video was very persuasive of a vision, and looking forward to hear Vice Admiral Thomas's comments. So, sir, please. Morning, sir. Appreciate it.
Just for me to level set here, I assume the video you just watched was the Fight from the Mock, guy standing in front of the screen, talking to it, getting co-analysis. Seen that movie, and the fact that I'm now charged with Fight from the Mock from CNO, and that's what she has in her brain. I'm like, all right, Naval Pack, help me out. And Naval created a great video. Now we got to deliver. I wish I'd come in earlier actually to listen to the rest of your remarks, just because of the few minutes that I was in here. Couple great questions that came out. Really appreciated the AI challenge that we're facing, and I did just to allay your fears. I was with General Glavy yesterday, and the two of us opened the Don IT Summit together, and then we went together over to Naval and NIWC to have some discussions. And Jerry and I work pretty close together in the building, and are both fairly new, although we're having a hard time saying that anymore. And we both have the same vision, and it's all about supporting the warfighter. And so I had some pretty good demos with Seiko O'Connor and her team over there, looked at the things we need to do, and I'll talk a little bit about the sensing and the making sense and decision advantage and all the things that we need for the warfighter. And when it all comes down to it, it requires two things. It requires good data, and it requires Spectrum to be able to move that data around in an assured manner. And I'm so off my script and my speech, that's okay, I'll just keep going. I did just leave Admiral Kaler's remarks downstairs. He was opening up the AFCEA West symposium. And the fact that we have the Don IT Summit, the Spectrum Summit, and AFCEA West all going on at the same time, tremendously valuable because the community is so intertwined, and all these things in this information warfare expertise do overlap and rely on one another. I will tell you that the house down there was a whole lot more full than it is up here, so I'm really glad that it's a pretty full group up here. There was more than there wasn't a seat empty, and the only thing I really got to hear Admiral Kaler speak about was his opening salvo of the three things that are his priorities, and number one is maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific so that all countries, small and large, can prosper from the global economy. And so obviously, as your Navy that is a global Navy, sails around all of the world, not just a small region of the world, maintaining that sea control, tremendously important, and probably really hit us upside the head how important when we saw what happened in the Red Sea over the last 6 to 9 months with the Houthis, and how in a littoral environment, a country, quite frankly, with meager resources, can shut down an important international strait, or at least, if not shut it down, make it really hard to transit. And if you're not paying attention, most of the global economy has chosen to go around Africa, and that cost and time is being absorbed by the free world that's now having to go around. Now we'll see where the ceasefire goes and how much the missile effects subside, but right now we're still kind of paying attention to where do the Houthi rebels go with that problem. His second priority was to deter communist China. And I was fortunate enough to be 7th Fleet for 2.5 years and sail out there, and we deter by sailing forward and forward presence. Part of that is with gray ships, and I was very fortunate to have the first unmanned surface vessel deployment of our 4 unmanned vessels come out to 7th Fleet. And I'll tell you, that became a huge spectrum challenge that I don't think we appreciated as much as we should have. And we started getting on that early, but it's still to the last second before they were going into international waters and trying to use some of their sensors, international spectrum approval in somebody else's international water proved to be a pretty interesting challenge, and they were our allies. And so but that's the future. That's, maybe not the future like the video future, but it's the future where we're working toward. His third priority that he articulated was, if we're unable to deter China, then we will prevail in conflict. And that gets right into all the things that we're working on in the Pentagon with respect to the NAV plan. And I think probably this educated crowd in here has probably read the NAV plan, probably gets the NAV plan. I'll weave the NAV plan in and out of my remarks. But with that totally unscripted opening, let me jump in and try to catch up to where I was going to be talking about. I think we're all kind of watching what the new administration will do with spectrum policy. Certainly there was some pretty articulated policy out there in the last administration. I don't know yet where the new administration will land, and we're going to obviously carry out all the executive orders and efficiently and professionally follow what our president tells us to do, and that's what we do in the military. But we'll see. We just haven't got anything in that regard yet. So this group is particularly interested in it, and we'll be following it. But we all know that spectrum's a finite resource, and so it's going to be up to us as the Navy and Marine Corps team to make sure we're representing spectrum appropriately in all the different forms. And I really do think that spectrum is the key to maneuver warfare. If you look out at the battle space, I like to talk about battle space. If you look out there at the size of the battle space, the proliferation of sensors in the battle space, the information gathering in the battle space, and how do you move that around, and how do you use it for your advantage, but at the same time deny and disrupt and defeat the other individual's opportunity, a lot of that key aspect lies in spectrum. And so, one of these just so important things that probably operators, unless you're really tied into spectrum, you just kind of take it for granted that it's there and you're going to have it. And that's kind of not true. We need to guard it, but I'll talk a little bit about how we can't be obstinate. We've got to look and work on how do we dynamically share it. And that's the thing that I think where the Navy and Marine Corps team is kind of leaning in that dynamic spectrum sharing efforts. And I'll talk a little bit about that. One thing you should really know about me up front, I, as the DCNO in 2 and 6, I'm a nuke as well. Where did you do your nuke thing? Nimitz. Okay, when were you on Nimitz? Who was your CO? Put you on the spot. Hardest question of the day. Yeah, well. No, that's good. I was on Nimitz too a few times, but I really did appreciate my young reactor officers that were super smart, and I'm an E2 Hawkeye guy by trade, so spectrum to me is really important from day one, and I fully appreciate the need to sense and detect and MCON and all the things with spectrum. And then I went off into the nuke world as well, and served with a whole lot of smart young officers. And then I did do Navy postgraduate school, got a master's in information technology, but unlike all my other classmates who went off into the information warfare community, I stayed in the URL community. And you're supposed to do a payback tour when you go to Navy postgraduate school. And I kept saying, all right, I'm not going to have to do this. And I got far enough away. Now they're making me pay it back as N2 and 6, and it's a lot harder than what I learned back in the 90s, but not a bit less important. And so I really am excited about this portfolio, and it really is. If you read the NAV plan, and if you look at the word ecosystem that's in the NAV plan and throughout it, and if you read each of the enabling capabilities and the capabilities of the NIFs, and then you think about CNO's Project 33 targets, you can find information warfare and you can find spectrum kind of in every single one of them. It just is foundational to the way we operate as a military. I also see everything through a warfighting lens. I'm a Westpac sailor. I've done all my deployments with the exception of Mount Whitney over in the Westpac. I'm old enough that the Soviet Union was still there. I absolutely remember MCON flight operations. I absolutely remember flying outer air battle, detecting Soviet regiments as they, regimental raids, and bears coming out and trying to find us. And it's almost kind of weird Back to the Future situation that we're sitting in right now with a different peer adversary. But the tactics have to evolve. But the spectrum understanding is much more complex because there's more phenomenology from the spectrum that we have to understand and either utilize or deny. And so that's what makes the N2 and 6 portfolio so much fun and so interesting. And again, at the foundation of it all is spectrum. I'm going to assume you've read the NAV plan, but just I'll kind of weave it in and out of my remarks. She talks about expanding the Navy's contribution, CNO, talks about expanding the Navy's contribution to the joint warfighting ecosystem. And then she also talks about agility within the NAV plan. And for me, agility is really critical for us to understand how to successfully navigate our reliance on the spectrum. I've talked a little bit about that already, but fundamentally, I think everybody understands that distributed maritime operations is the way that we think about the battle space now. And if you're going to be distributed and maneuver in a distributed, coordinated manner, that spectrum becomes even more important. And then I'll also kind of weave that into fight from the mock. If you're working as a fleet across a huge battle space, synchronizing across all domains is really important. And all domains, when I was a JO, cyber wasn't really a thing. Space was, GPS didn't even exist when I was a JO, and we knew how to operate without GPS back in the day. We got to train ourselves on some capabilities that maybe we took for granted back in the day. But CNO's Project 33 really is going to raise our level of readiness. And she talks about raising our level of readiness in case we're called upon. She highlights 2027 as the year that we need to be ready. She talks about increasing our warfighting advantage to the joint warfighting ecosystem. That word ecosystem, it's an interconnected group of systems, and if you're part of that ecosystem, you can get outsized compounded effects. And those that aren't part of the system don't. And we in the U.S. military we've always fought well, not always, but we have honed and improved our ability to fight as a joint warfighting force. And in my current job, I work quite a bit with cybercom and with spacecom, and those two domains are so central to everything we're going to do in maneuver warfare. And so it's all the way from space down to the seabed. And across that entire range of battle space, spectrum's at the heart of that entire thing. When she talks about her 7 NAV plan Project 33 goals, those are things that she as CNO is going to put her thumb on and track. We have our WIN and our NIF efforts that were in CNO Gilday's NAV plan, and she maintained those. She added one. She added non-traditional sea denial, and doesn't take a rocket scientist to go look at the Black Sea, look at what Ukraine, a country that didn't have a navy, is able to do against Russia. We want some of that. We need some of that. That's something we can scale at pace, and it denies the adversary maneuver. And so same WIN NIF constructs from before, and then she adds her Project 33 targets, and she adds those because she sees as the 33rd CNO, when she turns over to 34th, she knows that we need to be here so that we're more ready than communist China should they make a bad decision. And so those targets that she's put out there, one is platform readiness. We have 100 ships at sea every day. I heard the discussion about readiness that was going on and how are we understanding our readiness and improving our readiness. When I went to Naval yesterday, had a chance to look at Admiral Kano's efforts to better get feedback. When I was flying my E2, we had this thing called in-flight performance monitoring, and it ran little bit checks on all of my boxes, and it was notoriously inaccurate. It would come back and tell me that stuff was broken when it wasn't broken, and you would just like, hey, it's working, so I'm going to ignore IFPM. Well, we're at a whole different level now, and what they were showing me at NAVWAR yesterday was the ability to not only run tests over and over, turn it into statistical modeling, become a little bit predictive, and put the data onto dashboards so we really understand our readiness and understand the performance of our systems, with the goal of trying to get to a point where we can see something beginning to fail and get ahead of that curve, so that these really important information systems that we utilize are more reliable, or we can improve the reliability of them. So some of that's with some burgeoning AI technology. Part of that is making sure the data is curated and the source data that we're using is accurate. And so, we're creating a little ecosystem of tech pubs and bringing in some of our troubleshooting documentation, sticking it all in a curated database, and then being able to use it and get that out to the edge, so the folks on the edge have that opportunity to look through history of what worked, look through tech pubs in a rapid fashion. It's kind of a large language model effort at this point, but you can open your brain to where could it go, and what kind of things, as we get more data into there, could we really improve our readiness. So that's pretty exciting stuff, and somewhere, an area that we really, especially in the IW world, I would say every warfare. I don't want to single out IW, because in the ship and the aviation world, we have the same challenges, and hopefully she's a SysCom of IW, so I imagine it's going to cross into the other SysComs as well. The second P-33 target, fight from the Mach. So I had a Mach at 7th Fleet. I would say of all the Machs out there, it was probably the most active Mach, with Pac Fleet being right there with us. Because we had all the ships and forces forward inside the WES every day, we knew exactly what they were doing. We were communicating with them. We were directing maneuver. We were practicing long-range fires. We were practicing DMO, and we had information flowing in, and it was good. It wasn't what's necessary for a complex peer adversary. And so the video that kind of talks about co-analysis and talks about a denied battle space that you have to be able to, we're in a different fight right now, where the day of organic sensors being able to be the thing that targets and then be able to bring in a weapon from some other, the organic inorganic boundary is being kludged together, and the information across domains is being kludged together, and then our adversary gets a vote, and how they're maneuvering and what they're doing has to be factored into these COA decisions, and it's happening at a very an increasing speed. And I'll give you like a vignette of learning that's going on in the Navy right now, and it happened in the last 6-9 months. The shooting in the Red Sea. a lot of this was talked about at the Surface Naval Association, and the learning that our surface platforms and our teams were doing with the multiple one-way attack UAVs, the anti-ship ballistic missiles that were being shot at our ships in the Red Sea. Some of those engagements were really well, and some of those engagements we could have done better at. And the Surflant commander talked about the transparency of tapes. And so basically in the past, it would take us a long time to download the exchanges, get them back, get them analyzed. And when I say a long time, like a couple months to get the information back. And by then you've moved on to the next engagement. We're now down into the hours and day turnaround and the learning. And us in the aviation community have learned the value of tapes a long time ago, where you go do your engagement, you come back, download the engagement, you replay it, and you learn from it. Where now the surface community has got that same cultural shift and mentality of learning and being transparent when things don't go well. And it really is starting to permeate our forces and the way we think and learn. And that's going to really set us apart from our adversary, who isn't very transparent, who doesn't have that trust, who doesn't have that culture of learning. They do have a culture of learning, but the really important thing is to be able to say when you're not doing something right. And that's maybe what the other side is lacking. And you see it in certain people getting fired when that trust is not there. And so just not something that's ingrained in their culture. And I think it's something that is, you talk about asymmetric advantages, that's a huge asymmetric advantage on our side. She also talks about, and so in the fight for the mock, just to bring it back to that target, is that learning that's going on not only on our ships, in our mocks. We have to be able to create training environments for these really complex battle space events. We need to be able to deny spectrum and deny use of various sensors and be able to have our teams understand and adjust. And if we can do it with AI and with something that can sense the battle space and help us make those decisions, there's going to be, in my mind, a human in the loop for quite a bit, because we just can't blindly afford to let the machine make the decision. There'll be a lot of complex calculations that have to go into making those decisions, but they need to be guided and QA'd. And then the speed of decision is the thing that I think is really where we got to focus to get inside the OODA loop of the other guy. That's where we're probably not going to outbuild Communist China right now. Their manufacturing capacity, their ship building capacity, aviation building capacity, far more tailor-made for producing. The world has allowed them to become the world's manufacturer, and they've done a good job of shepherding resources for that effort. But we can outthink them, and we can turn inside their thinking OODA loop, and that's where we're going to have to do if we're going to stay in front of them. And I think we're kind of tailor-made as a U.S. force to be able to do that. The next thing she talks about is recruiting and retaining talent. And if I was going to turn this into a spectrum conversation, there's very few folks, quite frankly, that are spectrum gurus in our military. We have our crowd, and they are like the folks that, in my strike groups and on my ships, I had those handful of folks that really understood spectrum, understood how to get permissions, understood where the conflicts were, but they were a handful. And like I said, most of us just take it for granted that it's going to be there. And so as the competition for spectrum heats up, as we try to figure out how to dynamically share, that's something that we're going to have to improve upon. And then those folks that we recruit and retain, and we've done a pretty good job this last year despite the challenges. And even in the world of spectrum, there's competition among prime vendors to take those smart people that understand it and recruit them. We got to keep them in the military, and we have to have quality of service to make sure they want to stay in the military. We have to treat them right, and so that's another one of CNO's goals. And then her last one, well, actually it's two more. Invest in warfighting competency. It's complex stuff that you're working on. Spectrum, it's not something you can kind of reach on, get your hands around and mold it. It's technically challenging, and it's kind of the nuke school electrical engineering stuff that kicked my butt, that you all are working on the ones and zeros and how to how to manage it. It's really complex, and it's a warfighting competency that we probably don't put as much effort into. And then our critical infrastructure, making sure that the backbones of our NICTAMs and our NCTSs and all of the networks that we need to push that information around, that it's available. And so, we understand spectrum's a finite resource as the Navy. We know that commercial resources are trying to get more of the spectrum so they can use it for commercial profitability, quite frankly. And they've been pretty vocal about, they got their lobbies on the Hill. They've got their groups that are trying to get more spectrum. And we, in the past, I would say I learned a valuable lesson during my testimony, quite frankly. When I was talking to the congressional members, I made a comment about needing to maintain that we protected our spectrum. And I got called out by one of the congressional members that, you can't just not even think about sharing it. It doesn't work that way. And so we can't just be indiscriminate about how we defend the spectrum. And so we kind of pivoted our role and the way we think about the discussions on spectrum. And I've been to a few dinners with some of the commercial wireless industry leaders to talk about dynamic spectrum sharing. What could we do? How can we do it? And so we're working on that. First and foremost, we don't want to compromise the spectrum we have. We don't want to just give it away without really being smart about it and understanding repercussions. And so if we're just non-thoughtful and we're indiscriminate in the way that we share, that could come back and hurt us. All that stuff I articulated about battle space, about the need for spectrum, we can't afford to not have the spectrum that we need to maneuver within. But at the same time, we can't just say, can't share spectrum at all. And so being agile, being able to rehearse. I didn't talk about live virtual constructive. That is where we're going from training. We can't replicate the size of the battle space in our training areas, and we're starting to go more into a live virtual constructive so we can give representations that are what we think we'll fight against. That requires spectrum to be able to do LVC and have wireless connectivity. Our ranges are wired so that we can go back and do that playback I talked about and learn and rehearse. That requires spectrum. And so there's kind of this conflict of our need for spectrum, but then also our understanding that it is a finite resource and we have to be responsible in the way that we communicate with industry. So I think as I get toward the end of my time here, I think the most important thing is as we look to figure out what does dynamic spectrum sharing mean. This is where I really need your help. We have opportunities, and the NRL's test lab has kind of stepped up to be an area where we can partner with industry, try to demonstrate, try to show that it can actually occur. What does dynamic spectrum sharing really mean? What are the tools? Right now, there's nothing proven out there that says, this is how we do it. We've got technology is advancing, and so there's opportunities to go out and actually demonstrate what does dynamic spectrum sharing mean, and that's really what the grand challenge is to ensure that we have unimpeded access. I said unfettered access in my testimony, and that's the word that the congressman jumped on, unfettered. What do you mean by unfettered? So I'll go with unimpeded access to the spectrum, so that we're thoughtful about it, that we dynamically share if we can, but we really need, and the cross-functional teams that are working this issue, the smart people in this room that are working this issue, that really is the grand challenge, is to figure out how do we technically develop sharing solutions, but go out there and actually test it and prove it. VCNO is a great leader, and he often comes back to the Tarzan model. And he says, before I let go of this vine, I want to make sure I have this vine. And I would say that that's kind of a vignette for spectrum sharing. Before we give up spectrum, we got to make sure we can dynamically share that band of spectrum and make sure that we can truly not impede our warfighting training or our warfighting capability. And most of this is 12 miles and in, but sometimes the band can push back further out to our training ranges that are within a couple hundred miles of our coast. So I think really some of the keys to success, that NRL lab, getting in there and actually doing some proving, finding some partners in industry that are willing to come together, that's important. Ensuring that we're consistent in our messaging and that we're talking about it the same way is important. Ensuring that we're aligning the subject matter experts in this room and the technical thinking about it, so that we're coming out with one voice across the Navy and Marine Corps team and actually our other joint partners. And then ensuring that we're partnering in our efforts for the Worldwide Radio Conference. That's a huge amount of effort that goes in to make sure that when we get to the global stage, that make some pretty broad decisions about spectrum, that we're prepared and the people that represent us know our messaging when they get to the Worldwide Radio Conference. Again, our goal is not to stop spectrum sharing. Our goal is to be thoughtful about it, be smart about it, and ensure we're not just giving it up, and make sure that we're technically informed. So what I need from you, I need you to be authoritative. I need you to be hard-hitting in the way you articulate the need for spectrum. I need you to be precise. My deputy, Jen Edgen, likes to talk about a rifle versus a shotgun and what we're asking for. Make sure that we're very detailed in what we need and understand what we need. We need sailors and Marines who are trained in spectrum maneuver and that will speak up and aren't afraid to raise issues when there's a problem. And most importantly, in today's national security environment, we can't let the other guy dictate global spectrum rules, and they will. They're a smart adversary, and they will go after areas that will hurt us because they understand those areas, and we can't let that happen. So we got to be on guard for that, and we got to be armed and ready and aggressive on that respect. So really, I appreciate the time and effort that you're going to put into this Spectrum Summit. I think it's perfectly aligned with the other things that are going on. We got all the right industries. We've got all the right smart people here. It takes a lot of effort to come together to have these hard, honest discussions. You need to be honest. You need to speak up and be a voice. And I appreciate what you're going to do. It takes a lot of brains to tackle this very difficult issue, and I appreciate the dedication that you put into it. And with that, thank you very much.